Ukrainian defenders from the 22nd Separate Mechanized Brigade have taken a new group of Russians into captivity. Judging by the chevrons, soldiers from Akhmat unit are also among the captured. Good work. And again, we have a great story from our friend Dmitry, from War Translated. Big post from Russian volunteer Kashevarova, who argues that the Kursk catastrophe could have been predicted while going over every single thing that went wrong with the Russian army in the past 2 years. It's nothing particularly new, but quite telling still of the current state of affairs. Kursk region. Problems, fakes, corruption. Since August 11th, I have not written anything about the enemy invasion of the Kursk region. But what can we say if in the posts by the Ministry of Defense, the seizure of part of the territories of the Kursk region is called an invasion attempt? Official newspeak, and in fact lies, and a general lack of understanding of what is happening from the very bottom to the very top, forces you to just do your job and not communicate with idiots. And most importantly, I didn't want to interfere with our guys' work, knocking out the enemy, and I watched what the others were writing. I have the conclusions, like any sensible person in the country, without panic and without, "We will soon reach Warsaw," that is, real facts. So, let's start with February 2022, which preceded the transfer of military operations to the territory of the Russian Federation, and whether it was really that big of a secret. Part 1. Problems of the General Staff with calculations. The New York Times, and some journalists and media focused on keeping a certain group in power, report that the Kursk operation of the Ukrainian armed forces was kept in secrecy. It was such a big secret that just a year ago, far-sighted people, those with brains in their heads and not instructions, said that Ukraine would transfer the front to Russian territory. That is, on the territory of the regions of our country bordering Ukraine, so to speak the territory of old Russia. Belgorod, Kursk, Bryansk. The front line since 2022, Kherson, Zaporozhye, LPR, DPR, has been about 1,200 kilometers. At the very beginning, there were miscalculations that when we arrived on February 24th, everyone would greet us with flowers. Yes, those people who burned Russians in the House of Trade Unions in Odessa and were strengthened by Azov, Kraken, and other formations will be glad to see the military with the Russian tricolor. Only people with deep schizophrenia can think like this, who have no connection with reality for a long time. At the beginning of 2022, our guys were burned. There was no order to fire back from Moscow, so our army lost personnel and equipment. This led to the fact that our army, which had already suffered losses, could not hold an extended front with a prepared enemy army. The PMC Wagner was called to help, and the International Special Forces Akhmat was created under the leadership of Apti Alaudinov. But even here there was not enough regular army. Akhmat and Wagner were good fighters, but there were few of them. And again, miscalculation and lies led to the fact that the Ukrainian side harshly pushed us through in early September with its Kharkov counteroffensive. Izium, Balakleya, Lyman happened. We regrouped so much that we left the locals and our own people surrounded. Wounded soldiers woke up in hospitals after anesthesia, and the Ukrainian armed forces were already standing over them. And again, it turns out that Ukraine was preparing for war. It turns out that a counterattack was being prepared, but for some reason the military leadership did not attach any importance to all the information. We had to mobilize in September 2022, and then the miscalculations started happening one after another. The equipment and uniforms were stolen, sold, resold, not even manufactured. The machine guns were rusty. They gave out Mosin rifles. No comms, wires from the Second World War times were issued. The first mobilized were sent to the front lines within a few weeks, completely untrained, to plug the holes. Again, the loss of a resource, its waste, replenishment of the exchange fund for the enemy, since holes remained and people ran out. Global problems began with payments, treatment, and rehabilitation. This all spread by word of mouth, which caused an outflow of volunteers to the front. While would-be commanders laid waste to people and equipment, social problems, non-payment for wounds, non-payment of combat, and much, much more simply, were not resolved. The government, the State Duma, and the Federation Council, as institutions of power, abstained from the topic of SMO. Only a small part of the elite was actively involved in the work. The situation was aggravated by the fact that the vast majority of our wounded were from drones, the need for which was denied by the military and officials aged 60 plus. At this time, the rear supplied the army with drones, thermal imagers, sights, uniforms, mask nets, logs, weapons, cars, even water and food. Part 2. Problems of the General Staff with calculations. Also, problems with ammo have again led and continue to lead to waste of human resources. The battles near Ugledar and for Avdiivka and Marinka clearly demonstrated what should not be done. And in other directions, they were sent into assault without proper artillery preparation. In areas where the commanders were not distinguished by intelligence and ingenuity, they drove fighters to get a hero of Russia, or to take a village with 3 destroyed houses by a certain date. Such commanders arranged formations not far from the contant lines and organized choral singing for 100 to 150 people. We all know how it ends. The enemy was watching all this. He saw how the RF armed forces' smaller resources were thoughtlessly wasted compared to theirs. And so the enemy began to create additional hotbeds of conflict in order to stretch the front even further, so that we constantly pull forces from one place to another, thereby creating gaps in the defense of the territories we have already occupied. Is this a secret move by Ukraine? No, quite natural and logical. The question is not them, but why did we allow this to happen? We knew that Ukraine could not resist Russia along the front line, which was precisely imposed by the Russian armed forces, but it was as if we did not specifically protect our borders, allowing the enemy into our territory. And Ukraine took the path of transferring the acute phase of the conflict to territories where there is no SMO, seeing that there is no one there to resist them. First, they entered Belgorod, pulling our forces from other directions, and now they created a hotbed in the Kursk region, also pulling forces from other directions. Meanwhile, Russia seems to be deliberately weakening its front. When human resources dried up due to wrong decisions and systemic problems, the task was set to take volunteers, since the country did not dare to undertake a new mobilization. In the first wave, volunteers volunteered themselves, but then there were fewer and fewer of them, and the quality of the fighters became lower and lower. But the recruitment plan was and is still in place. When the decline in those taking up volunteer contracts began, they began to agitate or force those mobilized to switch to a contract basis, and thereby reported on the replenishment of contract soldiers, although in fact, there were no more people. Through Wagner's recruitment structure, they tried to increase the number of fighters, but some recruiters simply began to traffic people, collaborating with military registration and enlistment offices and local administrations. And good fighters with specialties, an artilleryman, a grenade launcher, a signalman, a tanker, and so on, ended up with the butchers and immediately went on an assault, so we lost a lot of qualified military personnel. Now we see that payments for volunteers are being increased. I'm not a fan of this. First, it creates discord between mobilized and contract soldiers, especially their families. Why is there more for someone, less for us? And those who went to fight before are also indignant. Secondly, this is even irrational from the point of view of spending public money, since often there is 1.5 to 2 months between signing a contract and ending up in a hospital bed. In part number 4 of my opus, I will separately touch upon financial miscalculations. And third, many are in no hurry to go. They are still waiting for an increase in payments. Fourth, as I already wrote, the main part does not want to go, because the systemic problems that I constantly talk about are not being solved, or are being solved only manually individually.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.